Hey everyone, thank you very much for joining this session. It's been a while. I'm trying to remember when was the last time I presented in a global event. Maybe it was this year, with the COVID staying at home, it's a bit confusing. I'm going to take you through a couple of things. I'm going to refresh our memory around why are we here from the get-go. I'm going to try and take a bit of a different angle on the challenges that cloud brings. By the way, I think, Peter mentioned I had a company in the cloud security space, and we used to say from the get-go that cloud is the best thing that happened to IT. And I think it has a lot of opportunities also to be the best thing that happens to security. We haven't had in the history of security so many opportunities to actually build in security into the application lifecycle and to automate a lot of things. But with that said, cloud is also the best thing that happened to developers and to application developers because it allows them to move really fast, which obviously brings challenges. So I'm going to spend some time talking about that and sort of the way that we at Check Point, at the cloud security group, look at the challenges, and then trying to figure out sort of what is the blueprint to solving these problems in the cloud, even before we dive into what Check Point actually does. Then share with you a bit about what Check Point does and some of the stuff that's going to come up in the next 6 months. I'm not going to share 3 years roadmap. That's going to take a lot of time, and also 3 years is a long time. More around the next 6 months for you that are already using Check Point in the cloud to understand where we're going. Actually, speaking of people who are using Check Point in the cloud, so we like to say Check Point is cloud security. We have a lot of heritage in cybersecurity as a whole. Check Point, I like to say, literally invented cybersecurity with the first firewall and internet security. Check Point is cloud security. Over the last 4 or 5 years, we've invested heavily into cloud security through acquisitions. Obviously, that's how I reached Check Point, but also in a lot of organic development. We have, as you can see here, some of the numbers. And I think for people that know Check Point for a while, looking from the outside in, it's actually surprising to see some of the numbers here. One out of 4 largest banks in the world use Check Point in the cloud. They use Check Point in the cloud. Obviously, more people use just Check Point. One of 4 global Fortune 500 use Check Point in the cloud to secure their cloud environment. Over 500 cloud experts, over $100 million in revenue. There's so many big numbers, which are sometimes, again, like I said, a bit hard to see when you look at the bigger picture of Check Point and people know Check Point for a while. But we've been spending a lot of effort making sure that we are there. One of the things that we understand, and I think you guys on the practitioner side understand also, is that saying cloud security is almost like saying cybersecurity. Cloud replicates almost the entire ecosystem of problem that we had before cloud into a new environment, which is cloud, which I'm going to talk about a bit in a second. So actually, I mean, a lot of people talked about this before I came on, so I'm going to be quick about it. But obviously, we've demonstrated that, it's not about, are you going to move to the cloud? Will you move to the cloud? Maybe it's not safe to move to the cloud. You're moving to the cloud. If you didn't already move most of your workloads, you will move most of your workloads. It's just the reality. And I think what proved more than anything else in the last 18 months that and it's a bit frustrating, I think, for security practitioners, we lost the ability to say no anyway. So, and I think that's a totally different mindset. We cannot say no to moving to the cloud. I speak with a lot of organizations. So if someone watching this presentation sits there and says, oh my God, he's right, because I actually, when people ask me today, do we secure what we have in the cloud? I say no, because they actually moved before I had the opportunity to secure it. You're not alone. I have to say probably the majority of the conversations I have with very security-oriented organizations is, hey, they moved. The barbarians are past the gate. They're not just at the gate, they're past the gate, and they're just going. And once they start launching stuff in the cloud and they see how easy it is, they continue to launch. So, and you can't say no anymore. And I think the last 18 months proved that cloud, remote, virtual, auto scale, auto availability is not, it's not something that you can say no to. And it's honestly not something that your organization can live without or be competitive without. So that has been proven. So I think we live in a totally different environment. And this is actually an amazing statistic that cloud security breaches surpass on-prem breaches for the first time in 2021. If anyone is surprised, then they obviously didn't see any chart of cloud adoption together with understanding how hard it is to keep up from a security perspective. Again, security was always hard. But if you look at us as security practitioners, we had the time, really, we had the time to actually think about securing. And even then, it was really hard and there were a lot of breaches. In the cloud, there's just no time. And I think the biggest problem, and that's the way I like to sort of put it together, everything is just 100 times. It's 100 times faster. It happens 100 times more often. If you think about launching a machine in your data center, once you move to the cloud, by the nature of how easy it is, it's just going to happen 100 times faster. And it's going to happen 100 times more because your developers, your DevOps people, they're only a script away from launching that machine. So everything is 100 times harder. Obviously, security is 100 times harder or scaled, definitely if you take the traditional approaches. And that's not surprising that there's more breaches happening in cloud data centers today compared to traditional data centers. I think it's a totally new problem space from, again, scale and velocity is the biggest challenge. And I don't know about you guys, but I can tell you, even for Checkpoint and for a lot of the customers that we talk with, the security team size didn't increase 100 times. Even though it's 100 times easier to launch a data center, it's 100 times easier to scale it, and you have 100 times administrators, because every developer is an administrator or can have access. You don't have usually, I don't know about your organization, I assume you're the same, you don't have 100 times the resources. So that's why this number actually makes perfect sense. So, and I think when you look at this it's a bit overwhelming. I think when we talk about, when we talk with organizations, a lot of the stuff that we hear is around, okay, so where do I start even? How do I even start to scope the problem? And one of the things that we said over the last few years is that the blueprint that we at Checkpoint have been building outside the cloud, before cloud was invented, is still very valid. The pillars that you need to look at are still very valid. You've always started, when you look at your data center, before it was a cloud data center, you did network security and threat prevention at the perimeter, and you did segmentation. You did it in your existing network. Then you did posture management. You made sure that there's not a lot of vulnerabilities, that you don't have misconfigurations, that things are not just open, that, for example, privileges are minimized. You've done all that stuff. You called it posture management, vol management, you had different names for it. Obviously, you had the practice of application security. Maybe you had a traditional web application firewall, or you had other solutions around application security, but you did it. And then the more advanced organizations had NDR, network detection and response, or all sorts of, now you know it's called XDR, but the idea of being able to collect intelligence from across the organization to find advanced threats. You had these pillars. The cloud, like we said, it's a replica. It's a virtual, auto-scalable replica of your old environment, of your old paradigm. But like we just talked about, everything is just way faster, 100 times faster, 100 times more available, 100 times at scale. So really, when you look at these pillars, you still need to think in the same pillars. We think in the same pillars. What we're trying to understand is, how do you take these pillars and make them actually work in 100 times faster environment? And if you think about the essence of the challenge here, is that what we are trying to protect, and this is when we talk about innovation in the cloud, I really believe there's only, if I look at one mega trend in innovation that you should be looking at, is automation. Because like we said earlier, the cloud allows your customers, or what you're trying to secure, to be fully automated. That's what's happening right now. Your developers, your application developers, they're automating everything. Obviously, it started with shifting left and automating pipelines, but right now, everything is automated. I mean, the cloud, by definition, automates infrastructure. In order for us on the security practitioner side to be able to secure this stuff, the number one innovation we should be looking at is automation. We'll never have enough people, we'll never have enough hours in the day to chase an automated environment or an automated application lifecycle. So really the key innovation is automation. So we've, when you look at our sort of the way that we think about it, and I think that really for you in the audience, probably this is the framework would fit the same. We think about it in three pillars: security, automated, and everywhere. And again, think about your entire cloud environment as what this framework is talking about. So security, it starts with posture, always started with posture. In the cloud, it's just 100 times more important because you have 100 times more opportunities to make mistakes. And then it goes to prevention. Dorit mentioned that Checkpoint was always about prevention. Now, prevention in the cloud takes a bit of a different form. You know, when Checkpoint originally did prevention, it was stopping, blocking attacks in the on the perimeter, for example. It's still very much valid. We're going to talk about it, but there's different forms of prevention. For example, a zero trust approach is prevention. If I'm not allowing anything but what's supposed to be there, that's prevention. If there's an identity and I can minimize the privileges of that identity to only what it needs to do, I'm preventing an attack. Actually, even if I'm configuring my infrastructure correctly to minimize the attack surface, I'm preventing attacks, right? So there's a different sense of prevention, but posture and prevention are the two things in security. Automation, listen, this is, like I said, this is the main innovation track you should be looking at. We have a saying internally on the stuff that we're developing. I think you should think the same. It ain't done till it's automated. Whatever you're working on right now, if it's not automated, you're not done with this project. That's your definition of done for a cloud security project. It ain't done till it's automated. Now, can you automate everything day one? Probably not. Should you aspire and think about how to automate? Yes, because otherwise you can't do these things at 100 times speed and scale. And then, so by the way, automation has two things. You want to make security available automatically, basically, because you're not going to have the time to send someone to deploy security. Your developer is deploying serverless functions in the cloud or containers in the cloud. You're not going to be able to manually attach protection to them. He's going to deploy an application and then he's going to change it. You're not going to have the time to change policies. Whatever you're doing needs to be there as automatically as possible. And also the configuration needs to be minimal. Ideally, automatic. If an application is there and you're doing API and web application protection, you want to aspire that your application will be protected automatically. And then everywhere, because you're multi-cloud, different workloads, and so forth. Okay, I'm going to move forward to what we provide today. And I think some of you that have been in some of our events have seen this circle before. So obviously we cover multiple clouds. Dorit mentioned that at the beginning, and we always aspire to add more coverage into different public cloud environments. But even more interesting, when you look at that circle, it sort of follows that pillar. So we have our solutions for cloud network security. So it started obviously with our core gateway capability translated to the cloud. So think about the checkpoint gateway and firewall and threat prevention gateway, translated to a cloud environment so it can run natively and auto-scale natively in the cloud environments. Very big business for us, help a lot of customers, thousands of customers that help them migrate their data centers to the cloud. Cloud security posture management, obviously a solution that allows you in an agentless manner to scan across your environment, understand misconfiguration, identify misconfiguration and compliance problems, and provide clear remediation action. So a lot of the challenge really is around, what do I even have there? Which assets are running in the cloud? Which virtual machines? Which containers? Are they configured correctly? Are they configured according to best practices? And can I act? And what do I need to do in order to be compliant? Then we move in. So if you think about these layers, we protected the network. Then we protect the infrastructure as far as the configuration layer, posture, and then you move into the workloads themselves. You saw the video earlier. We introduced a solution earlier this year, beginning of 2021, for automated web and API security. Think about everything you would, if you ever touched a web application firewall and you still have nightmares from configuring it again and again and again because your application changed. You can only imagine, if you didn't tackle this challenge yet, how hard it is going to be in the cloud. Application security always sucks. It sucks way more. It sucks actually 100 times in the cloud. So we introduced a solution for web application and API security automation. Basically allows you to put our component or our security capability in front of your application in an automatic fashion. It auto installs itself as part of the CI/CD process, and there's close to zero touch automatic prevention. Then we introduced our solution. So if you look at your application, it's now made of these microservices, containers a lot of the time, and serverless functions. So we introduced last year, actually with the acquisition of Protego, like Peter mentioned, a solution for serverless security, all the way from configuring it correctly to minimizing the permissions to runtime protection for serverless functions. And we introduced this year a full solution for Kubernetes and container security. So the idea again is protect the network, segment the network, manage the infrastructure, the posture, make sure that things are configured correctly and remediate where you need to. And then look at the workloads themselves, look at the application as a whole with API and web application protection, and then sort of zoom in into the workloads that make that application, whether they're containers and serverless functions, make sure that they're configured correctly, and also protect them in runtime. So that's the workload protection piece. And we have our solution for intelligence, which basically, think about it sort of what a threat intelligence would look like when it's reborn for the cloud. So we collect all the information from the entire environment. We obviously have a lot of information of what's going on, and we collect it in order to identify advanced threats. So that's our intelligence solution. So that's the circle sort of that if you're using Checkpoint to help you secure stuff in the cloud, or you're going to be used, these are the pillars that we're working on. Now, when we look at moving forward, the innovation, so we're going to add a couple of things that are really interesting. On the network security side, we see very, I would say, immense almost need for micro-segmentation. So obviously macro-segmentation, you can do with security groups, you can do it with the Checkpoint gateway, which is Checkpoint CloudGuard network security, which allows you to do macro-segmentation. But we're seeing more and more, I have all these applications that are based on microservices, and I want to create this zero trust micro-segmentation between the application. Application A shouldn't be talking with application B. So I want to only allow application A to talk with whatever it needs to talk. So micro-segmentation in Kubernetes environment is something that we are actually releasing in early availability very soon. So if you're in the market for micro-segmentation, this is the time. And next year it's going to be GA. Very cool solution. All the way, by the way, if you remember, there's one thing you need to look for: automation. There's no way to do manual micro-segmentation. No one is going to chase application environment with thousands of containers and tens of clusters and start to do manual micro-segmentation. So our solution there automatically learns the network environment, actually literally looks at the network and understands and recommends micro-segmentation based on the actual traffic, and then you can automatically enforce it. And so it maps it out, gives you a recommendation, you can automatically enforce it, and it continuously learns the environment as it goes. So micro-segmentation, zero trust as part of our solution for cloud network security is something that we are very excited actually to bring out to the market. And if you want to see something really cool, ask for a demo from your Checkpoint rep. The other thing on the posture management side, we've invested a lot of effort, and we're going to be continuously releasing solutions around infrastructure as code, security solutions, which I'm going to talk about in a second. In addition to that, we always want to provide more context into your posture environment. So we started with reading the cloud provider's API, looking at the entire asset landscape and understanding how things are configured. And now we're actually adding the ability to look at inside virtual machines that are running without an agent, by the way, cool technology, and to allow you to actually understand what's running on your virtual machines and put that in the context of the posture picture that you're getting. So think about not only understanding that there is an EC2 machine there, but also understanding that it's running Linux and maybe it has a malware, agentless, in an agentless fashion, and taking that information, putting it in the context of your entire posture picture, so you can understand, for example, that you should fix this first because that EC2 machine actually has a vulnerability, or it actually runs, maybe it has malware and you need to isolate it. So more context into your posture in order to allow you to make better decisions and prioritize. More and more focus into what's vulnerable and not where the vulnerabilities are. So you're going to see a lot of releases in that area in the next 3 to 6 months around contextual posture management. Remember that term, contextual posture management. Again, fully automated with the ability to allow you to actually focus on what matters. So another area is identities. So identity is the new perimeter in the cloud. I mean, if you remember the Capital One breach, then everybody were talking about that EC2 machine, that actually there were two identities there that were problematic. One, someone got access into your environment through the web application vulnerability that should have been stopped with an automatic application protection, by the way. And then the machine specifically that used to access the database it was overprivileged. It had permissions to access stuff it shouldn't need in day-to-day life. Now, the challenge is you have thousands of virtual machines, they're going up and down in serverless and containers, and your infrastructure changes all the time. When you have 100 administrators and 10,000 developers, how do you create a least privilege environment in such a complex environment? So our solution for identity and entitlement management, which we're going to be rolling out in the next 6 months, is going to tackle that. And again, allow you to automate the process of creating a least privilege environment for both users and entities like machines, machines. Again, I could spend 50 hours on this thing, but I'm going to leave it at that. If you're interested, ask to see a demo of what's coming up. I talked about ISC scanning, Terraform, CloudFormation templates, ARM templates, the ability to actually do posture management already during the pipeline. if you can stop something from being configured in the production environment, you want to do that. Your developer will give you a big hug because he'd rather fix it then than fix it after it's already deployed. And then the last element that I wanted to bring to your attention, again, I talked about it because we're going to see a very cool demo by Maya of the solution. During this year and late last year, we introduced a full, I think the most complete cloud application and workload protection solution on one unified platform, all the way from web application and API security to container security and serverless security, all in one platform, fully automated. You're going to see a very cool demo by Maya in like 7 seconds from now. And that's it. So these are the solutions that I'm going to leave that to the demo. Very happy to be here. See you at CPX. Good luck with your cloud security journey.
Hello, everybody. My name is Maya Levine. Thank you for joining us at the Checkpoint Secure Cloud event. I'm joined today by Jeff Schwartz from Checkpoint, James Bland from AWS, and Nathan Pierce from HashiCorp. I'll let them introduce themselves really quickly. James, why don't you go ahead?
Hello, Maya. My name is James Bland. I'm the Global Tech Lead here at Amazon Web Services.
Great. And Nathan?
Hi, I'm Nathan Pierce, and I work at HashiCorp in the Emerging Products Go-to-Market team.
And last but not least?
Thanks, Maya. Hi, guys. My name is Jeff Schwartz. I'm Vice President of North American Engineering here at Checkpoint. Thanks for joining us.
All right. And we're just going to dive right into the content with the first question. And that's, what trends are you seeing in regards to organizations accelerating their cloud application deployments? James, do you want to go ahead and take this one?
Yeah, we're kind of seeing a bunch of different things that are happening. One is obviously containers are very big in terms of deployment, specifically around EKS. So we're seeing a lot of companies take advantage of the of Kubernetes technology. Being able to deploy not only in AWS cloud, but being able to deploy in on-premise and also in other multiple cloud environments that customers are looking for. Another trend we're seeing is serverless. Serverless is a awesome trend that we're seeing because one is it allows customers to pay per value. So basically, you're paying for what you're using and you're getting value out of it. So services such as Lambda, DynamoDB, and API Gateway. Other trends we're seeing is kind of in the immutable infrastructure area. So in terms of immutable infrastructure, we're seeing customers it's shifting towards this instead of like managing servers and just general compute. They want to move to where they're making things changes dynamically, like leveraging infrastructure as code. And lastly, the other like major trend we're seeing is kind of like a shift towards microservices. And this is more of an architectural pattern, but it also comes with its challenges as well. And one thing that I like to call the complexity tsunami.
All right. Well, I definitely want to get into microservices in a little bit, but before we do that, I do want to touch on security. So how can you make sure that security is not sacrificed through this acceleration of cloud application deployments? And I'll hand it over to Jeff to talk about that a little bit.
Great, thanks, Maya. Yeah, just building on some of James' commentary, microservices and containerized and scalable workload compute capacity in the cloud is really one of the most amazing things that allows organizations to really experiment at velocity, that they can move quickly, they can test and iterate and grow very, very scalably and very quickly. The challenge that many organizations have is that the application owners are the ones that are building and scaling and testing. And what grows from this organically is wild inconsistencies in security, both adherence and enforcement controls. And that's one of the challenges and we've seen this with compute virtualization many years ago, where dev, QA, staging, and prod get kind of stacked and interwoven amongst itself, and it becomes a challenge operationally to unwind after the fact. So one of the things that we see organizations adopting to improve the consistency across this is adoption of combination of runtime controls as well as CSPM services that can provide both workload protection and native CSPM enforcement. that can be integrated into the existing operational model, that organizations don't have to necessarily change the velocity with which they iterate in the cloud, but they can do so with very clear guardrails, or what we refer to as kind of a paved road. That guardrails give a negative connotation that you're avoiding doing something dangerous, but paved road allows you to run fast and allows you to drive much more quickly. You can still take the dirt road on the side, but it's gonna slow you down. You're gonna run into more problems, and this concept of paved roads allow you to run much more quickly, and it allows the organization to continue to increase capacity, in these very modern, more modern implementations.
Cool. Nathan, is there anything you wanted to add here?
Yes, glad you asked. I love what you were saying there. For me, the way I like to frame it, putting my HashiCorp hat on, it's about velocity, agility in these microservice architectures. Awarded organizations a lot of velocity in their adoption of cloud, but it was often velocity without precision, without being able to create reproducible patterns, the kind of things that you get from infrastructure as code. So how can I have velocity and know I have a guaranteed outcome every time, a reproducible outcome every time, that security models and my security posture is baked into? And that was that thing that when we saw a lot of shadow IT departments kind of leap on cloud early, they all focused on the agility and the velocity, but lacking in the precision that they had in pre-cloud models. And HashiCorp's focus, its popularity of Terraform is all about that codification of how can I have this velocity and precision without sacrificing on either. I don't want to slow things down by bringing old models, but equally I don't want to sacrifice on security to be fast. And it's about finding that perfect balance.
All right, so how can we get that balance, right? We're talking about microservices, and there's a lot of benefits to using them. But what strategies or tools do you recommend to customers to offset the risk of microservices? Because in a lot of ways, they widen the attack surface, right? So anybody who wants to take this, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll dive right in. That there's a couple different things that are necessary, and it aligns. Two examples of things that really change the security outcome and improve the overall operational security of the environment, are being able to provide both dynamic and application service testing, and being able to provide that both at build and runtime controls. So at build, to ensure that you're not ingesting any either open CVEs or libraries, or old libraries that may include vulnerabilities associated with them, that you're not ingesting anything that infrastructure as code that may include any embedded secrets or overly permissive permissions in terms of downstream access. And then at runtime, to be able to ensure that input variables that are injected into these microservices, or in the case of AWS Lambda, that any downstream dependencies or code that's being accessed by these by the parameters that are input characteristics that are input, that they're not creating any downstream exposures or accessing information that might otherwise be sensitive. So being able to do this at build and runtime, and integrate with the existing operational and service delivery model that organizations have as part of their CI/CD pipeline, are examples of things that organizations can do today to improve the overall security of their microservice implementations.
So let me add to what Jeff said with just a few buzzy terms, right? So we think of it as like shift left security, but also shift right. So when you're shifting left, basically trying to move things closer to the developer. So developers have context when you do find problems that are like CVEs and things like that they can fix it while they have a lot of the context. Because we know that once things get out into production environments, it actually, the cost grows exponentially, right, to fix that problem. So if you can fix it closer to the developer, you're better off, and it's also less cost there. And then the shift right is basically moving to runtime protection, right? Because you're not going to catch everything within the pipeline. And so you're going to want to basically make sure that you have great context and you have awareness of what you're running out in production, especially helping with those 0-day kind of attacks, but also helping with like, the unknowns unknown, right? Those problems that you find later, but then after you've released something into production. So you want to have a great context about what you have in production, so then you can address those problems quickly.
Good points there, James. And I want to just jump on one of the comments you said there about that kind of time to find something. And if you find something as part of that deployment, I think the key in being more reactive and more responsive to security kind of issues comes down to how you plan your automation from the beginning. So a lot of companies that have kind of started small with little sort of areas of automation scripts here, various other things there. Over time, that's evolved, but none of that was developed from an all-encompassing perspective of what is my path back from failure. And I always encourage people to plan all automation around from a critical outage recovery, plan from that, because then when I have an issue, maybe it's a security vulnerability that needs patching, et cetera, I'm not having to work out my path forward from a known bad state. What I want to be doing is working out my path forward from my known good state and redeploying that. And that's the kind of thing we get from these infrastructure as code models. Once, of course, I do my root cause analysis and I identify what has to be changed, I want to be able to push that down, not go around and manually patch individual servers, because that's a microservice anti-pattern. So a lot of it comes down to just how you architect your automation. And I would say, even I prefer the term orchestrated systems. Automations are very task-oriented, person-serving typically. Orchestrated systems, though, that's where you hear SRE speak, and how I can make these amazing technologies run by small teams that can, if they have to provide a patch, it can be run from one place, and I know that it worked because it was a reproducible part of my operating model.
That's a great point, and it touches on something that I think is really important, which is automation for remediation, right? As security professionals, we always pitch you want your threats to be prevented, not just detected, right? It doesn't help you to get hundreds and hundreds of high severity alerts, and then you have to sift through the one that, is actually a really big issue. And that's part of the reason why we want customers to be able to prevent things that are going wrong in their environments automatically. But the reality of doing that in production is very complicated. And I'd like you all to talk us through how can you handle that complexity, and how you balance the risk of missing an alert and having things just in detection, or potentially breaking something in production because you have things automated to prevent any threats.
So I'll maybe get us going here. So, Nathan made a really important point about automation. I think it's that when you talk about anything that's a transient service or ephemeral service like microservices and what we're really discussing here today, that we can't rely on human response. That if it can't be automated, that it can't properly be scaled. That there needs to be automation built into the process. And while a person or a human needs to review for corner cases, but once those corner cases are identified, there needs to be automation built around any subsequent or downstream artifact that is similar that would require prevention. And as you mentioned, Maya, that once a potential compromise or security event occurs, lateral movement across any given either VPC or even hybrid cloud implementation, as we've seen with most recent high-profile security breaches, that lateral movement is a trivial element of the attack after initial compromise. Once an initial foothold is gained, security is very difficult to retroactively get the horse back into the barn. So I think it's really, really important that security is automated, but not just automation for automation's sake, that there's qualitative advantage around the capabilities that are being applied against that automation capabilities, because with the wildly dynamic nature of what's happening in the threat landscape, that if you're not able to be as proactive as possible in identifying potential external threats or or insider threat conditions, that automating preventative controls against those will be a severe handicap downstream. So I think automation is absolutely critical. I think the other ingredient here is qualitative advantage around the intelligence that's feeding those automation tools.
Yeah, this question sort of reminded me of my days of being an engineer, right? Where I'd get like thousands of alerts every day. And so to me, being successful at that, what you need is a system that basically helps you prioritize kind of like the severity and the impacts of those, right? Because nobody can deal with thousands of alerts every day, right? I mean, there's just, contextually, you just can't do it. And so you need a centralized view into this that prioritizes the severity and impact, and then you also need to wrap that with like high levels of automation. But to like what Jeff just mentioned earlier, not automation for automation's sake. You kind of, it needs to be actionable, and it needs to be something that and even granular in terms of the levels of automation, because sometimes people aren't very comfortable with automating things to the point where it just does it in the background. Sometimes they need to, like have an alert, they get triage, and then maybe the mechanism or the automation is being able to push the button to basically take care of that incident.
Well said. We actually see a lot of people do that using HashiCorp tools. They want to take the human at the keyboard element away, but they still want the person to review and say, that is not triggered by a bad thing and going to blow up half my service right now. So you can actually have both those worlds. And that's what a lot of the ecosystem's about, the great tooling that we have with partners like Checkpoint and AWS. That's how we're able to do those things with those integration points.
All right. Well, I think that's all the time that we have today. We'll keep it short and sweet. Thank you all for joining us. And thank you to James, Nathan, and Jeff for your insights. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.